Greetings, everyone. It's Megan Grace here, and it's December, and this is the new moon activation. And please join me in welcoming Bronwyn Simons with me here today.
Hi, Megan. It's so great to be back.
It is so good to be here. I say that every month, and I think I would say it forever if I had this opportunity to do this with you forever. So I treasure it each and every month. It's
I
been a beautiful companion walking me through 2020. So,
Yeah, it's been wonderful to start doing these activations during this really challenging year. It's been great for me too to have this monthly check-in to kind of get grounded in the energies
yeah.
with my friend.
I
So
meant to look back and see what month we started this. I don't think it was right in January of 2020, was it? I think it,
I think yeah, I don't know. It's been a while now. Maybe
yeah,
March or April, I'm thinking is maybe
that's
when.
what I'm thinking too. And maybe um, I hope we can commit to taking ourselves through one full cycle.
Definitely. I'm excited to keep going, and I will be excited in 2020 to be sharing some more optimistic and uplifting astrology with everybody. So
Okay,
that's something to
good.
look forward to as
Good. Yeah.
yeah.
I would like to kind of ground our conversation about December's new moon
Hmm.
in a bit of a retrospect on what this year has been.
Yeah.
A piece of information that just feels like it's really true for me right now. That as I have conversations with friends and other people who, that it seems that there's some common feeling,
Mhm.
more so than even knowing, you know.
Yeah.
But the feeling is that, and I'll speak for myself, having arrived here at the end of 2020, feeling as though I've gone through this year working towards something that feels more like an unraveling than a creation.
Hmm.
And that doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit my personality. It doesn't fit how I want to do life.
Yeah.
And yet, as the unraveling has been happening, I've recognized that there is gift and opportunity in all of this.
Yeah.
One of the ways, probably the main way, I've been moving through the 11 months. I use the word pivot, feeling like as a door has kind of closed, I've shifted to, okay, now we'll just do it this way. And that's definitely how I've been proceeding in all aspects of my professional life, which is shepherding Perennial and Surya Cafe through
Hmm.
these months. Personally, I feel like the approach I have been taking is to dig into some deep healing work, to
Hmm.
resolve some relationships or to resolve some past wounds in me and so forth. And that's been equally challenging work. Um, but as we move into this final month of 2020, I would say that at this point, the pivoting isn't working anymore.
Hmm.
And I found myself at a place when we further contracted Perennial and Surya Cafe just a few weeks ago for understandable reasons, you know.
Hmm.
But as that happened, I found myself sitting right on like a razor's edge of, do I give up
Hmm.
or do I let go,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And neither of those feel comfortable. Neither of those feel familiar. But I felt like I had to pick one, you know, because the option of pivoting, push forward, try harder, do it different, you know, just the options were off the table.
Yeah.
And I mean that personally, in my personal life and in my professional life, I felt like I had taken the work as far as I could take it.
Yeah.
And it left me in a place of, well, I feel like I have fallen into the letting go side, mostly. I've had some moments of sitting on the couch thinking, I'm just giving up, you know? But this sense of letting go has felt more like being in the river that I have always been in, and allowing myself to brush against the edges of the river and feeling like they are there now, not to bruise me or to, you know, cause further injury, but to say, no, just keep flowing this way a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So that imagery, and then yesterday when I was listening to you speak on another podcast, there was some reference to this idea that there's a fog light out there that we should and can start to see that fog light and use that fog light to guide us forward. You know? And my perspective on that has been that that fog light has been there throughout all of this. And I would use the word God to describe that fog light. Other words work perfectly well also, but the idea or the feeling of just being in the river now and seeing the fog light and still having absolutely no idea where I'm going, where the river is leading me, feels like where I am right now. And the last thing I'll kind of say about all of that is also what I heard in your other podcast was this idea that it is it's time to start to feel like you have a vision, or to start to create some strategies for yourself. And I wonder if I am a slow learner. I wonder if I am behind the times because
it's not there yet.
Other than the light, you know, and just kind of letting go into that light, so to speak. I'm not pulling down information, visions, as I call them, like I used to. And that's a bit terrifying / unfamiliar. So that's all what I offer to you. I hear a lot of my friends describing similar type scenarios. Sort of a what next, but I don't even know where to begin. So, how's that for just a little tiny intro?
It's real and beautiful and heavy and so aligned with what I think most of us are feeling. I know I personally am exhausted. I'm just exhausted. I feel exhausted and depleted. And as you have expressed, a little short on vision and optimism. And I want to, you mentioned, you started, there's so much here, Megan. And I never want to share astrology as a way for us to escape, even intellectually escape from our emotional and physical realities. I always want to offer it as a tool of comfort in reflecting our reality, because sometimes even when we are in a really difficult and challenging place where hope is hard to find, as we are now, having that reflection from the greater world, from the energetic world, from, as you say, God, is a comfort in itself. And with that in mind, I want to talk about Saturn, the idea of Saturn. So if you've been following along, you know that this is the big idea of this year. But this character, this archetype, this energy of Saturn is one of the faces of God. If we think about how God acts through our teachers, we have these two faces in these big teacher planets, Jupiter and Saturn. This is, if we think of all the ways that we as humans have envisioned and given meaning to our experiences of these forces bigger than ourselves that move through our souls, astrology is one really powerful language for expressing that. So I'm not saying the planets are gods. I'm saying they are a beautiful way of expressing these inexpressible ideas and beginning to connect with all of the different ways this thing we call God acts through our lives. So Jupiter and Saturn for the ancients were the outermost planets. So think about that idea of these kind of guardians of the edges of the known universe, that which stands between us and the great unknown, the hugeness of the cosmos where the stars live, the vastness that we can't comprehend. And there are these beautiful shining lights, Jupiter and Saturn, that stand between us and that vast, empty, incomprehensible space, and allow us to assimilate and understand and receive some of those big life energies. And they each play a different role in our psyche. Jupiter is that sensation we have of the divine as the benevolent teacher that loves and accepts you no matter what, and paves the way for you and offers you miracles and offers you ease and wisdom that is just granted, and those big visions that you're talking about spending your life pulling down. And Jupiter is what we experience if we do have a spiritual teacher in this life, when we sit at her or his feet. And we see that tradition in the East of darshan, right? The feeling that you get just being with your teacher of all is right with the world. That feeling we have if we're lucky as children and babies in our mother's arms. The deep feeling of connection, the transmission of wisdom, and divine right timing, things just flowing. That's one way that we experience the divine. But if things always flow and are always open-ended and are always handed to us and are always connected, we're missing half of our human experience, which is also about boundaries, structure, limitation. We can think of it in terms of God or the guru. We can even think of it in terms of parenting. If you have been around children or raised children, you know how important, if you've reparented yourself, you know how important it is to find that perfect balance between freedom and structure, between expansion and contraction. Even think about the birth process, which is all about the right combination of expansion and contraction, even on a physical level. So these are the two forces that work together. And we see this in all of our conceptions of the divine. Astrology is just one of those languages. And in astrology, we see those great forces embodied in those archetypes of Jupiter and Saturn. So what's been happening to us this year is Saturn, that more wrathful but equally compassionate face of the guru, that creates structure that limits us, that forces us into hard work, that crystallizes things, but also you said there's been an unraveling, and it's that feeling of both creating the structure and then dismantling the structure when it's no longer relevant. All of that is Saturn work. And in any given normal year, you have, a balance of Saturn, Jupiter. They're both active in the sky, in our psyches. And we expand and we contract, and we set boundaries, and then we move into them. We experience luck and grace and wisdom and that beautiful feeling of darshan. And then we experience maybe being left out or limitation or something not coming through for us. And we grow by balancing those two things. And in this time it's so long that we've been in this dark feeling place, Saturn, that force of contraction, has been very dominant and has been working with other archetypal forces. I'm talking about Pluto, the god of the underworld, that is really asking us to do this hard work, do it in our shadow places, and to do it really without much help from the other face of the guru, Jupiter, the benevolent, wise, giving one. Because Jupiter, in terms of astrological language, has been not in his happy place this year. Saturn has been very strong. So there's a purpose to all of these cycles. But the reality of what we've been in lately is this place of the power of Saturn. And there's actually a beautiful book written by a Vedic astrologer called The Greatness of Saturn. And it takes you through a myth of meeting these two kings that operate in very different ways. And it's really a story about, and I recommend that book if you kind of want to go into the deep mythopoetic ideas that we've been working with in very real ways this year. But the idea is, of these two possible faces of the divine, the most compassionate one is actually the one that limits us. And because that is our support. And that is not to say that what we go through when it's very active, and this is an unusual year not to be repeated in our lifetimes.
Thank you.
Thank goodness. But we have been working with raw, unmediated Saturn energy. There's usually a balance. Jupiter, Saturn, like good cop, bad cop. It's all the harsh teacher this year. Like, I don't need to tell you guys that. It feels like that too. And I think as time goes on, and I don't want to make light of this because this is real. Like, these are real, emotional, and physical, and real social, and real psychological, and even disease-wise, real physical energies that are moving through our own bodies, through the body politic, through the body of the earth. This is real. It's not like it's pretty and everything's going to be okay. These are big natural forces that move through our lives, and we are small compared to them. And this is a terrible time that we are living through. And there's nothing that we can paint over that to talk about the greatness of that archetype or how we're all growing up. And that's all true in one sense, but it doesn't mean that this is good or that it's all for the best or any of that. I think those are ideas that we say to comfort ourselves when we're going through times that are so hard that we have a difficult time making sense of. However, there is hope. And there is, I think, retrospectively over the next few years, we will look back on this time and see the ways that we have been strengthened and tempered and brought closer to our own authenticity and our own sense of the divine. That's not unmitigated, because there will be losses as well. But it's Saturn work, and it's the unavoidable work of that dark half of life. So what we're experiencing right now in these weeks is the bitter end of this cycle, things really are about to shift. This doesn't mean that we're going to wake up in a field of daisies and go running around and all our problems will be over. It means that this cycle, and in astrology, that's what we work with, is cycles. If we don't think about linear time, we think about repeating the same lessons over and over, right? It's what we call in my Buddhist tradition samsara. It's the wheel of repetition that this life is about. And here
But
we
Brian,
are.
would you agree with me that, like, on an individual level, the samskara is like a spiraling thing?
Yes.
We come back around cyclically to the same old, things that need to be confronted. But
Yes.
each time we come back around, we're at an elevated state, so to speak. We have new awareness from our last time we did this, and we're integrating that. And
Yes.
so it isn't just circling the drain. I mean, I suppose you could go the wrong direction, but it's mainly
Yeah,
a
let's not get
spiraling
too dark
towards-
here.
Right.
That's
It's mainly a
that's
cycle moving towards evolution, right?
that's the philosophy that I embrace. And we could argue that in terms of Eastern philosophy, but this has been my life experience. That if I apply myself and I'm honest with myself and compassionate with myself and work at my life, that each time I make that round, there are improvements. That's just been my lived experience.
Mine too.
I encourage clients to try to work ourselves out of this mindset of, oh, here I am again. Well, of course, here we are again. That's how the world works. We're embedded in these beautiful cycles. We see it all around us, night and day, summer and winter. It's the dark moon, the full moon. It's the beautiful evolutionary nature of this world. We go in circles, not in a straight line.
And it's so interesting that as human beings, we fight that natural pattern.
I really don't understand that, and it truly is my life's work to invite us to try to draw us back into those nurturing cycles, because they are nurturing. And this is a little bit of a hard sell at this point, because here we've been through this really, really dark, difficult, and challenging point in the cycle. So it's a hard sell. Like, here we are, we will be here again.
You pulled us back in a little bit when you said it won't be this way for the rest of our lifetime.
It won't. No, these are long, long cycles, and we can kind of see why. Because we can see not only our individual lessons, I don't really love that word, our individual experiences and growth during this time, but we can see how we, as a human family, we can see how this is a pivot point, a potential pivot point. Again, not to give it an automatic evolutionary spin, because it all depends on how we use this pivot point. And we will be here again as a nation, as a human family, not in exactly this form, but we've struggled through this before in human history. Difficult regimes, plagues. We know how to do this. But as far as our little lifetimes, this is a one-off. This is that dark time that we're living through. And what I want to encourage everyone about today is that we really are at the conclusion we're at the end of this cycle. We have actually been experiencing the end of the cycle all of this year. It's in astrological terms, we're talking about what we call the Balsamic Phase. So this applies to the moon, but also to all of the planets that cycle, which is all of them. So all of these growth cycles that we go through in a month, in a year, in 28 years, in 200 years, in 800 years. Planetary cycles are from very small to very big. What we have right now is this really historic intersection of many different cycles ending and then beginning. Because remember, every end has the seeds of the beginning. That's how cycles work. Dark moon starts to take light. But before we can start to take light again, it gets dark. Nature is such an amazing teacher, right? This is where we are, the balsamic phase, the dark phase, where it gets completely dark and then the new light just starts to grow. We're actually sitting in that place in the lunar cycle, in that little 1 month cycle, as we talk together, where the moon has lost most of her light. She's about to go dark, and then she'll start to take light again. So if we think of this in terms of, yeah, we're living through this month, we live through this every month with our emotions and sort of our energy flow. But the bigger archetypal planetary cycles also go through this long building up of light, releasing of light, and then going into darkness. And of course, the darkness is right before the new cycle starts to take light again. So
So
what
we
we've been,
have the monthly cycle
Mhm.
with the moon moving from the dark moon to the full moon, or
Yeah.
through that full thing, and then we're coming up on the winter solstice, which is the day
That's
of
a
the
solar
longest.
cycle. So
Right.
yeah. So without getting into a lot of astrological complexity, because it's the way all these cycles interact makes this sacred science what it is. But if we can remember that those growth cycles, which the moon is such a beautiful teacher of, from new to full and then waning back down to new again. That's not just about that one body. It's cycles are relational. What we're talking about with the moon is actually the relationship between the moon and the sun. We
Okay.
see it expressed in the moon, but the cycle is relational. And all of these cycles are relational. So that's key as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the big cycles that's ending right now is the relational cycle between Jupiter and Saturn. Just like I was talking about a little bit earlier, these two faces of the teacher, or these two faces of the divine, or the two faces of the inner light and how we grow ourselves up, however you want to think about it. The Saturn, who brings limits, and Jupiter, who brings expansion.
So those two are in a room together, and they've been
They they do a dance, and they go just like the moon and sun. They appear to be farther away from each other and then closer together. And once every 20 years, they meet up at the same point. And that's what we're heading towards right now. So just like with the moon, that period right before, because the new moon is the sun and the moon meeting up. The full moon is when they appear to be at their farthest distance from each other. So, and that defines the cycle, the meeting and pulling apart of those two bodies. So Jupiter, Saturn also have this dance that they do together where they come together, and then it takes them 20 years to do their dance of pulling apart and then coming back together. And just like we experience with the lunar cycle, we experience an expansion and then a contraction, then a darkness, then the beginning of the new cycle. So these are the big forces within us. And the ending of this Jupiter-Saturn cycle has occurred this year, and it has occurred with Saturn in his strongest place and Jupiter in one of his weakest places. So this is ancient astrology, where the sign that the planet hangs out in says something about how much power they have. And it's really useful for us as astrologers to be able to look at that to see how, because every 20 years we go through this Jupiter Saturn, but why is this year so different? One of the reasons is the signs that they are in and how powerful Saturn is and how weak Jupiter has been this year. So we've had that contracting force, which also just met up with Pluto. So shadowy contracting force really dominating, and the expansive force not having much energy to do its thing. All this in the balsamic
Okay.
ending phase, that conclusion. Like we were saying before we got on the call, it's like when you're getting ready to present your thesis, you've been in grad school for a couple of years, you've done all this work. And what a chaotic time that is for anybody who's had that experience. We remember the lack of readiness, the stress, the wanting to give up, the feeling like, why didn't I do all of this before? Just, I think there's a pretty universal experience of that being a stressful and chaotic time, and wanting to give up. I mean, maybe you didn't go to grad school, but you've had other experiences like this where you just meet the end of a certain cycle. Even leading up to something really good, like a wedding, can be like chaos right before the event, right? Because everything kind of gets shoved into that little space right beforehand. And all of our doubts and fears about what the next cycle is going to look like, we're experiencing that. We're experiencing exhaustion because we've been working really hard at whatever it is, the thesis or the wedding planning, or getting ready to give birth. It's all of that. So I pick up on that birth analogy. We've been through this time. I remember that 9th month of pregnancy. It was hot. It was in Los Angeles on the first floor. I couldn't open my windows. I was exhausted. I was over being pregnant. And yet you have this big birth process that you have to go through and this trepidation about what's next. This is where we are. We're about to give birth. And we've been through a lot. This is a difficult pregnancy. I mean, I don't know how many analogies I can pull out for this thing, but we're at the end and we're starting something new and it's really freaking hard. And we're experiencing that. This is why it's been so tough these last weeks. There's other stuff in the sky that I could talk about. Eclipse season, it's always really hard. There's a lot of stuff in the sky. But the main thing is we're at the end of this cycle and endings are hard and we're not really very good at them. And it's exhausting and it just feels hopeless and it's hard. It is because it's ending. So that's the good news. It's ending and beginning again. I'm sorry, I keep talking over you. You were going to ask me something.
I was just wondering if this Jupiter-Saturn meeting up is the Great Conjunction.
It is indeed.
December 21st. Okay.
December 21st, the Great Conjunction.
So what can we expect as mortals, as humans here, to feel or to experience? What might be the range of what that meeting up is going to feel like for us?
So I think an important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about these big cycles is they happen slowly. Although there is that one dramatic event, and we will see it in the sky. It is so dramatic for various reasons. Even though this happens once every 20 years, we don't always see it so brilliantly, and they don't always appear so close together in the sky. It's a very magical event that we haven't seen them like this for 800 years.
Wow.
Beautiful. And though there is that dramatic visual event, and it does correspond with a dramatic shift, we're talking long-term cycles. This is a 20-year, and then a 200-year, and then an 800-year cycle. So it's like a really heavy, big vehicle slowing down and then starting up again. We're not going to feel it like, oh, on the 21st, suddenly, woo, I feel a dramatic thing. It's often not like that. It's a slow, gradual, we're feeling it now, that gradual coming up to the renewal where we're like, can I keep going? Or should I give up? I'm so tired. I want to vision the new year for myself, but I don't really know how because I'm not feeling very hopeful. Gradually, over the coming weeks, it's just going to be like a little glimmer of light that starts to return. This is, again, we can learn so much from the moon, just watching a tiny sliver of light gradually, day by day, turn into this full. This is happening within us. It's that incremental shift back into hope. So I do encourage everyone to get outside, and we're going to come back to the new moon because that's the smaller version of this cycle. But between now and December 21st, you can watch those two planets getting closer and closer together. You can Google this and like how to view the Great Conjunction. Actually, that would be the best thing to do rather than me trying to explain how you can see it. But in the early evening, when it first gets dark, it's just slightly above the horizon, you'll see day by day the planets getting closer together. And this is a beautiful practice if you want to get out in the evening and watch that brilliant light of Jupiter, the benevolent face of the guru. And it's beautiful to see them in the sky and see how they express their different natures. Saturn's smaller and has this dull gray light. Jupiter is bigger and has this beautiful glowing, almost golden light. And they're very distinctly hanging out together there in the sky. It's quite a dramatic picture. And every day, incrementally, you'll see them drawing closer and closer together. As they draw closer and closer, that's the cycle finalizing and ending. And then on the 21st, we'll see them very, very close together, so they almost appear as one body. I think maybe that's what the Star of Bethlehem was one of those conjunctions that was visible, because it becomes very bright and it's very unusual to see
I
it.
love that idea.
And it's a beautiful idea to
Yeah.
roll that myth into it. The fact that it's on winter solstice, which is an unusual coincidence, not that there are any coincidences, but there's so many beautiful myths that pull into this.
Yeah.
And then we can watch them separate again. And as we watch that slow process, we can think, as they're drawing closer and closer together, I'm getting closer and closer to the renewal of hope and the
So
renewal of
it
my
isn't
energy.
like a sense of a meteor heading towards something with a idea that there's going to be this dynamic, dramatic, explosive encounter, you know, between
No.
two large forces.
I wish it was just like, yay, we'll get all our vision and hope back.
Yeah.
Winter solstice, mark your calendars. But that's
It sounds more like a peaceful landing into like a resolution of something, coming full circle, kind of completion sense to it.
And there's a lightening, and I mean that in both senses, of a growing light and a lessening of weight. So I think the felt sense of it is going to be both of those things, of gradually expanding light from the darkness that we're in, no light, to a sliver of light, to a little crescent of light. And then the heaviness part, because we are moving out of an Earth cycle. So this is talking about the larger term Saturn Jupiter cycles. For 200 years, those Jupiter Saturn meetups are ruled by a particular element. And for the last 200 years, we've been in Earth. So we're at the end of a 200-year cycle as well as a 20-year cycle. And that 200-year cycle has been heavy. It's been earth-based, and we can see that in our society. We can see since the Industrial Revolution, the overemphasis on earth and extracting our energy from the earth. And we've ridden that train as far as we can. And now we're turning to air. So that's a 200-year cycle of air. It's a big deal. So it's a big shift. And again, we're talking 200-year cycles. The awareness of this is going to grow on us over 10, 20, 40 years. So gradual increase of light, gradual shedding of heaviness. And I think that's how it's going to feel. I think it's beautiful to mark that date of the winter solstice and to get out there and see that wild astrology in the sky and to see how that speaks to you. And then also to be real and not to expect things to shift overnight and not to expect a dramatic experience. Not to rule one out either. It's a big conjunction, and maybe you'll have a dramatic experience of the weight lifting and the light coming in. I wish that for everyone. But I think what most of us will experience is a gradual lightening. The heaviness we start to shed the heaviness. We start to see that light growing again. And we start to be able to vision and strategize again. Little by little. What came to me as you were talking about, your beautiful image of floating in that river and just the sense of being contained by those banks. That vision is Jupiter and Saturn working together both at their best. That beautiful flow of expansion that Jupiter brings us, but a river uncontained by banks is not a river. It doesn't have any flow anymore. We can't go anywhere. And Saturn provides that containment, which ultimately is what nurtures us, that containment. Though we're super mad at it right now, like teenagers being mad at our parents for the limits, it really is that those containing banks. That's Saturn. And that experience that you have of feeling those as nurturing and containing is a pretty profound inner shift as it is of coming home to and befriending those Saturnian forces. So you may feel like you haven't accomplished the work, but just that image says that you have, that you've befriended Saturn, that you've befriended those edges and limits. And you understand how they contribute to the flow. I felt that in my body when you described that almost maternal kind of being held by those shores, and the surrender that it takes to really align with that and not resist the flow. But what I was thinking is what came to me when you were saying, but I can't strategize, I can't vision, is just opening your eyes, like that beautiful experience that we've had, all of us have had, of floating on water and just opening our eyes and seeing the vastness of the sky from that perspective. And I think we're gradually going to be able to do that. It's just an opening to it. We won't immediately be able to take action or pull in a lot of big visions that creative people like you and I are used to having such easy access to all of that. It's going to lift, and especially once Jupiter gets into Aquarius. Oh, this is the other big deal about this conjunction. It's at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So as they meet up, they're also both shifting into a completely new sign. Capricorn, the sign of hard work and climbing that mountain face, right? The little mountain goat that just clings to the bare rock. That's been us this year. Little mountain goats clinging to that bare rock, hanging on by a thread. Yeah. And now we get to go into Aquarius. Big vision, big vision. So we'll feel that. That ingress into Aquarius, we'll feel that. We may not be able to act on it right away, but we will feel that expansion of vision. That will come in fast.
When does that shift happen?
So they meet up at 0. That's when Saturn, I think, gets into Aquarius a few days before that. And then Jupiter will meet up at 0. The Jupiter changes we feel, because Jupiter changes once a year, and that really affects our mood. It's when he shifted into Capricorn, where he's not that happy last fall, out of his super happy place of Sagittarius. I think we all felt that. It's a real collective feeling, Jupiter. He's that 12-year cycle. He rules our collective mood in a way. So we'll feel that. That I'm really happy to say, like these larger cycles, it's harder to feel, but that Jupiter shifting into Aquarius on the 21st, we will feel that. It's like, I can breathe.
Yeah. So how about the shorter cycle that we're coming up on the new moon? I mean, the 14th, and what is...
It's big too, because it's an eclipse. So let me just pull up the chart here. I have the new moon chart. So eclipses, they happen in seasons twice a year. It's not always a big eclipse that we hear about, because maybe it's not a total eclipse, maybe it's not visible from where we are, but this is astrologically an event that happens twice a year. And you were talking about pivoting. Eclipses are pivot points. My mentor always talks about that idea of a strobe light, how if the light goes off for a minute and then comes back on, and there's been a change in the darkness, that we notice it, but we don't know exactly what's different. And so the eclipses happen when the sun and the moon meet up close to the nodes of fate. So those are sensitive points in the chart. And an eclipse is always a turning point, and it's always bigger energy than our usual lunar cycle. So solar eclipses happen on the new moon. That's how they happen. It's the sun and the moon coming together, which is what the new moon is. So the solar eclipse is always on the new moon. Lunar eclipses can only happen on the full moon. Solar eclipses can only happen on the new moon. The psychological or archetypal reality of eclipses are we feel the lunar eclipses internally and make emotional internal changes. And we see the solar eclipses in the outer world, or they represent changes that we see in our outer life. And every eclipse season, we get a chance to move between those two. It might be from inner to outer, from outer to inner. This season, on the full moon we had a lunar eclipse. So we had an experience of that inner slowing down or inner change. I think that, and then it travels to the next eclipse, in this case, a solar eclipse, and those weeks between the eclipses can be really tiring. can feel like times when we can't accomplish much. It's one of those the veils are thin kind of times. We're in this magical time out of time. And in a normal year, that's sort of magical and lovely to have these eclipse moments. In a year like this year, it's a little bit much. It's like icing on that difficult Saturn cake.
That's
And
just
once
what I was gonna
again,
say.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, so here we are again in this timeless time when we're expected to make internal changes. Can I stop now and just have some fun? So here we are in the eclipse portal. We're almost done. When you guys are watching this, we'll be on the new moon, and that's the solar eclipse. And a shift will happen. And you can look for what area of your life is pivoting. If we have time, I can quickly go through the rising signs and let you know what area of your life is affected, which might be interesting for you.
I think that would be great.
Because I think all of this ties together. They're not unrelated events because nothing in the archetypal sky is unrelated. And I really feel so strongly that what we've experienced during this eclipse season is preparing us for the shifts that we'll be making over time with the Great Conjunction. So it's the elegance of astrology as a system of personal growth, something I never cease to be amazed by. And the sort of inner the inner work that we've been doing again during this eclipse season, whatever it is that's come up for you over this last 2 weeks since the full moon, that last little piece of work, like I thought I had it, and then oh, there's still this that we've been working on. That is the very thing that you need to either accept or release. Accept or release, just like you were saying, sitting on your sofa thinking, do I let go or do I
give up? Yeah.
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 It's exactly the choice point that we're at. And this eclipse being on the south node is a beautiful releasing moment. So this, I mean, we're talking about really big energies, and it gives you a feeling of maybe lack of agency sometimes, like, what can I do? Here is what you can do. You can think about what is the thing that needs to be released. And please think small. Don't try to fix your whole life. This is not the time. Also, there's this amazing function of eclipses where something very small with intention can become something very big. So I'm not recommending ritual on the actual eclipse. That's for experts only. But I would like you to use this time to think about what is that one thing that needs to be released. Maybe you just need to declutter your closets so you can see straight and be really ready for the new year. Maybe there's that relationship, that friendship that's been just hanging on by a thread and it's really not feeding you anymore. And you need to just say, I'm going to maybe not see that person in 2021. Maybe it's just that old habit or pattern of thought, this negative inner voice that you're just like, I'm done. I don't need to think those thoughts anymore. Whatever it is for you, and pick something small that you can really work with. You can offer that to this eclipse. The eclipse will take it from you. That's very powerful. But don't do something big. And don't think about a person, because these are real energies. You know, if you're working with a relationship, just think about, who am I and what are my negative patterns in that relationship? And I want to give over this negative pattern. Otherwise, we're straying over into some gray area with our intentions, right? We want to keep it personal and positive. But it's a time, I'm making this with my hands, this is the south node that receives all of those offerings. Time to make offerings and time to release. So how do I know what to think about releasing in my life? I'll go through, if you know your rising sign, and tell you what area of life you want to think about releasing in. So if you know your ascendant, we can talk about what area of your life is going to be affected by this eclipse and how you can work with it. So what I want you to be thinking about is, in this area of life, what is a small act of releasing that I can do in order to symbolically bring myself closer to authenticity? So for those of you that have Sagittarius on the ascendant, this is going to fall into your first house. So sun, moon in your first house right now. And that means that you will be experiencing this eclipse around your identity, how you show up in the world, who you are, how you name yourself, all of those expressions of the self. So thinking about what is one small act I can take around how I identify myself in order to shift towards more authenticity. So next up is our Capricorns. If you have a Capricorn ascendant, you are going to be experiencing this eclipse in your 12th house. So that is the house of karma and the house of all of the things that are hidden from the world and your spirituality and your dream life. So what is one little shift that you would like to make, something that you would like to release in order to feel more aligned spiritually? That's for you guys, Capricorn on the ascendant. And for our Aquarians who are going to be really coming into your own in 2021, this will be in your 11th house. So something to do with your sense of belonging and your group affiliations. What is something that you can release in order to feel like you're living more deeply into a sense of belonging? Take a look at the groups that you belong to and make sure that all of them are ones that you want to carry into this next year. So then we have our beautiful Pisces. This is coming to you in your 10th house of career. So thinking about the shifts that you need to make, some small act of release or giving up that you can do to feel more aligned in your career path. And for Aries, it's all about your spiritual learning and your eventual travel plans. I know we're not traveling yet, but what you might be visioning for expanding into the world, whether it's through your mind or physically. What's the little shift you need to make, the thing you need to let go of to open up that world of travel and spiritual exploration for yourself? Or maybe around a spiritual teacher or something with the way you're educating yourself. And that means for Taurus, you're going to be working with either your debt or financial agreements that you've made or old family agreements that you've made, right? And by that, I mean, they might not be overt agreements, but those old ancestral patterns that you've just signed up for. It's kind of big work, 8th house work for you Taurus ascendants, to think about what's that one small step I can take towards releasing a debt, maybe make one small payment on it, or releasing an old habit of mine that doesn't really belong to me anymore. Maybe even just journaling about it is enough to release that, because that's big stuff. So you want to make sure you're taking small steps. That's for you, Taurus. And for Gemini, it's the same. It's your 7th house of partnership and relationship and your one-on-one relationships. What's one little shift that you need to make? Maybe a behavior that you need to give up in order to feel more aligned in your one-on-one and intimate relationships. And for you Cancers, you're going to be working in the 6th house of daily habits and health. So you like it there, Cancer. So you can make a shift around how you schedule your daily life, give up something in your schedule, or maybe give up something in the things that you take in to nourish your body. One small shift, and it's really going to turn things around in your health and how you approach your days. And Leos, you get the fun one. You get to work in the 5th house, which is our house of joy and creativity. So, and it may be parenting for you too, Leos. What is the one thing, little symbolic act you can give up in order to feel more emancipated in your creativity, more authentic in your parenting? So Virgos, your Virgo ascendants, you're going to be dealing with something in your 4th house. That's your home. So it might be something superficial, like, yes, that closet you need to clean out. Or you may be looking back at your deep sense of belonging in the world and the patterns you picked up from your family of origin and just what makes you feel safe and what is that one little thing you can let go of in order to feel more safe in the world. Yeah. or just clean a closet. Sometimes that can be the one act that you take to feel more safe in the world. You know, we can really feed ourselves with these small symbolic acts. So that's Virgo. For Libra, it's going to be something in your neighborhood or in the way that you think, your little neural pathways and patterns of mind. Maybe something in your sibling relationships, something that you need to give up to shift those familiar pathways. Maybe just taking a different drive to work. Not that any of us are driving to work, but think about that symbolically. How can I shift my patterns so that I'm living more authentically into the way that I learn and the way I experience my immediate surroundings? And Scorpio, you're going to be working in the second house of values. So maybe you need to make a shift in the way you bring in livelihood, or maybe there's something that just doesn't feel quite aligned with your values that have really shifted over the last year, but you're not fully living into the new values. Just think about that one little symbolic act you can make to live more authentically with your livelihood and your values. And that brings us back to Sag in the first house of identity. So there you have it. That helps you to hone in a little bit on what is that one little act of letting go, remembering always that those small symbolic acts down the road, it's like a tiny course correction that can lead you to a completely different destination. So don't try to take on the whole world. Don't try to do it all and fix everything in your life. Choose something really small, really like paying $10 on a debt or cleaning out the closet. And doing that with intention can open up a new world of living more authentically for you as we work through the next year. Okay, so that's your eclipse work, to think about that area of life. What can you offer into the eclipse energy, very mindfully, to keep it very positive and keep in your own lane, not be offering other people's stuff, in order to live in a way that feels more free and authentic and vibrant and visionary, all those Sagittarius things in your life. Maybe do some journaling about it. And the rising sign little projection may give you some guidance, but if that doesn't feel right, just work with whatever it is that is up for you that feels like it's ready for release. And again, work small. We don't have to fix the whole world right now. Just clean your closets or change one habit. It can be very empowering, and when we work with the energies like this, it can expand over the coming year into bigger changes that will really benefit you. So we could do that every new moon, just work through the rising signs and what is the house, because that's what we're working with, is what house in your chart does it fall into.
Okay.
And
So
that gives you some guidance.
That's work when you're working with your chart and your personal astrology. You always would look to what your ascendant sign is and how it's being, what relationship it's having with the current.
The ascendant is really important when we work with timing techniques like this. The ascendant is really the most personal piece of your chart. It's about exactly when and where you were born, and it defines you.
Okay.
And for us as astrologers, whenever we do any predictive work, we need that ascendant. The sun and moon are really important in your overall expression, your universal expression of yourself, how you live in the world and how you manage your emotions and how you want to shine. But as far as using astrology as a tool for prediction, even on a small scale like this, like predicting what area of life for you will be affected by this eclipse, that's when we need the ascendant. So it's less of a like personality defining tool than it is a predictive tool. And you can always do your own predictive astrology just by knowing your rising, and it's actually pretty simple to figure out what area of your life any given transit will affect by house. So I'm happy to run through that anytime with any of our big transits to help people narrow it down, because you will find that this will be pretty accurate. I'm sure some of you have realized that already just from my going through those rising sign, it's like, oh, I totally am ready to move something in my
Yeah.
house, or yeah, I do need to give that up in my career area. Tends
Yeah.
to be a pretty accurate tool.
Wonderful. Bronwyn, we will see you in 2021. I can't believe I get to say that.
I know, after the great
And
conjunction,
I
I'm
know.
very excited.
Yeah.
So,
And I heard you loud and clear. We can't we're not going to come on here in January and say, what?
woo!
Everything's not all different.
No,
We didn't hear that, but
no.
there is, we get to, I think, well, I'll speak for myself. I'm going to allow myself to put a parenthesis around 2020.
Yeah.
I've felt this one, and now I want to experience this side too.
And the winter
life will
solstice
go
is,
on, and
yeah.
cycles will continue, but it is uplifting for the spirit to feel like,
Yes, and that parenthesis can come on December 21st. You can very deliberately use that and celebrate that. Like, this is it. Those two planets moving into a new sign. It's a tangible, embodied shift that we will experience. I know this goes on YouTube, and if you guys want to drop into the comments and share with us what you are releasing now to be ready for the Great Conjunction, I'll
that would be
keep my
fun.
eye on those comments and engage with you guys. I'd love to hear from you. Keep it small, keep it real, but let us know so that we can amplify your energy by seeing what it is that you're releasing to be ready for this beautiful new energy. I'd love to
I
hear from
really
you guys.
believe in the power of expressing your intentions verbally,
Yeah.
writing them down, putting them out there into the
Yeah.
ether in a more powerful way than even just holding them in your mind does.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Thank you so much, Megan. I always really,
you.
really enjoy this. And
Me too.
I think the next time we meet, we'll have some more lighthearted transits to talk about.
Yeah, good. All right. Namaste.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Namaste. Be well. Thank you. Bye.